Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to the first session of the two-part series on Financial Services and Markets Act 2023, set to replace the original bill drafted in 2000 and purpose to have some amendments that regulate modern financial needs in post-Brexit environment. This goes way deeper than what meets the eye, especially for procurement professionals, financial controllers, and the third-party ecosystem. This is why we are here to fill some gaps, understand the change, and maybe, just maybe, able to formulate some form of vision of how it is going to be for UK and rest of the Europe in the coming months. My name is Priyanka, a growth marketer for Europe at GEP, and with me are these two incredible gentlemen and SMEs in financial services, Rob and Abraham. A warm welcome to both of you.
Hi Priyanka, hi everybody.
How are
Hello.
you
Hi,
doing?
Priyanka. Good, good.
Yeah, doing well, thanks, Priyanka, and happy to be here.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Super excited to delve into the topic today. And, excited to hear from our listeners as well. So if anyone has any questions, just, type them into the chat. And yeah, we're happy to pick those up as we progress.
Well, thank you for saying that, Ab. It is crucial for our audience questions to reach us. So let's begin, shall we? Before plunging into the complexities of this bill, let's start with the basics. And Rob, I would like us to start with you on this. It's only fair for our audience to have a little bit of background and set the stage right from the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Priyanka. And look, I won't go back into the bill that was made back in 2000 because I think it sort of derails us from the importance of the 2023 bill and the changes that were made there. So I guess to give some of the context and a bit of the background to this new bill. So it's been 7 years since the UK's momentous Brexit vote, and 3 years since the UK sort of formally exited the UK. And the journey of this bill, it began in the House of Commons in June 2022. This was back when Boris Johnson was at the helm as Prime Minister, and actually Rishi Sunak held the position as Chancellor at that time as well. I guess as the bill reached its second reading in the House of Commons, we welcomed Liz Truss into the role as the UK's Prime Minister, and her tenure, although it was brief, at least made some history as she stepped down on the day that the bill passed through the committee stage of the House of Commons, where basically every clause undergoes and underwent rigorous debate. So I guess that's just a bit of sort of history to little did we sort of anticipate that by the time the bill saw the light of day in June 2023, we would have seen the stewardship of three different prime ministers and four chancellors, and I guess ultimately settling with Rishi Sunak as prime minister.
Yeah. And just rewinding slightly last December as well, right, with Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt in the driving seats as um, so it was during this time that the UK government had issued the policy statement, right? They were unveiling the package of more than 30 regulatory reforms, what most of us would know as the Edinburgh reforms. So those reforms themselves, combined with the Financial Services and Markets Bill, together that's aimed at igniting and bolstering the competitiveness across the financial services sector, which will, naturally impact the broader UK economy as well, right? And at that point, when Jeremy Hunt had laid out the series of groundbreaking announcements, um, that was essentially aimed at aligning with the government's vision for the UK to stand and become the world's most innovative and competitive global financial center as a goal, and which is all a part of the articulation of the Brexit benefits essentially. And yeah, I mean, with that context in mind, let's go deeper into the heart of today's discussion.
Perfect. So now, as the stage is set, let's go into the more interesting part of it. As you said, Abe, the bill's impact on third party, and by third party I mean vendors, and how does it shifts the current process in and for FinServ. Rob.
Yeah. So first off, I think what would be interesting actually is to explore powers of the different regulatory bodies, and I guess more specifically the HM Treasury. So when it comes to these to the so-called critical third parties, so you refer to them as third parties, they're Priyanka, or suppliers, but within the bill they're referred to as critical third parties, and what the impact might be on them. And I guess it seems that HM Treasury, when I look at the bill, they hold lots of authority to designate critical third parties, ultimately really at their discretion. And one of the key parts is that this designation, it's intended to apply to third parties whose failure or disruption, in their opinion, could rattle the UK financial services market as a whole.
Yeah, Rob, 100%, right? It's quite a powerful tool. Um, Earlier, this designation was, let's say, done at a firm level, right? Each regulated financial institution would designate suppliers that were critical to their functioning and operations. So it's essentially based on whether the supplier services are critical to the day-to-day functioning of the institution, right? A few examples, let's say that um, the the most critical services that these financial institutions may provide to their customers, like opening an account or transferring funds between accounts. If the supplier were to fail, if these critical services were impacted, that's when a supplier is designated as a critical third party, which was essentially based on the guidance provided by the regulatory bodies in terms of third party management, right? We can look to SS 221, the supervisory statement, which is still in effect, but that was essentially where we were looking to for in terms of guidance on how to proceed. So it was the PRA telling the banks and insurance firms what to do, what not to do, how to manage their third parties. But now it's rolling it up a level, right? It's not about individual institutions themselves anymore. It's about the entire sector. So the HM Treasury can now designate third parties or critical third parties essentially. I'm sure we all love acronyms, so let's refer to them as CTPs. So CTPs will be designated for the financial services industry, and the Treasury can now instruct these designated critical third parties what to do or what not to do. Effectively meaning that if you're a supplier in the financial services sector, you can be under this regulation because of your financial services client base. That is, if you are providing critical services, essentially. And now the UK Treasury will have some direct power over you. Now, where this starts to get interesting is this cross-border technology firms as well, right? There may be a niche financial services technology firms, there may be big tech companies, and we know about the scale and power and influence of some of these large technology firms.
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting to see how that sort of situation plays out, isn't it, Abe? And
Mm.
I guess the other thing, it's true as well, isn't it, that I guess whilst HM Treasury, they have has these powers, the regulators, the independent regulators, they do still have a significant say, don't they, in the decision making, and the third parties themselves, they do have the option to make representations in writing. I guess the other thing as well is, the decision making is based on that data provided to the regulators by the individual financial institutions. So there's some familiarity there in terms of the of the processes. So, I would, like I say, the even with that in mind, the Treasury and the Chancellor, they do wield a lot of power, and ultimately they're going to have the final say with this new bill. I guess one of the things for me here, and kind of one of the head scratchers, is the Act talks about the powers, and we've just kind of explored some of those a little bit in terms of the powers. But what about the rules as well that need to be followed, and kind of what about the duties and expectations for these critical third parties? Does the Act go into any detail of exactly what that is?
So, right, Rob, that is the million dollar question, right? The Act doesn't necessarily specify the rules. It says that the third parties have to play by them, leaving it to the Treasury to effectively come up with them, right? It's like a blank canvas,
Mhm.
which adds a certain element of uncertainty for sure. Now let's look at an example, right? A bit like knowing that there are changes to the rugby rules, about the referees using, let's say, television match officials for yellow cards, but then they're not specifying what the changes exactly are. So you know the top line change, but they're not specifying what the changes exactly are until the season has started
Okay.
effectively.
Mhm.
So, but one place we can look is the discussion paper at DP 322, which was published before the bill went into place. And that does highlight potentially where we can expect these rules to come from, although from a 50,000-foot view at this point. But the firms will be expected to meet certain minimum resilience standards. They'll have to run resilience tests, participate in sector-wide exercises. We can safely assume at this point that this will be built on the existing operational resilience framework that financial services entities have to follow.
Okay, so just was just understanding that a little bit in what that means in practice. So first off, the CTPs, once they're designated, they'll need to demonstrate that they meet those minimum resilience standards by providing details of self-assessments and then participating in different resilience tests and perhaps kind of sector-wide exercises. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly that. And from what we can see in the discussion paper as well, right? It's most likely that the scenario testing is going to be the most frequently used testing tool. Scenarios can be anything ranging from malicious insiders to scenarios of physical effects of climate change. Scenarios that are taken will usually be quite severe yet plausible
Mm.
instances. So yeah, we have some ideas from the discussion paper at this point in terms of how it's going to be outlined.
Okay, and so I guess all of that's going to be, sounds like it's going to be based on sort of existing frameworks, but it's kind of not specifically set out in the Act explicitly at the moment. So I guess expanding on your kind of rugby analogy earlier, it's a bit like saying that perhaps like the recent Rugby Union World Cup, if the rules for that competition, they weren't explicitly set out for the teams, but they could expect some, to follow some existing rules during the competition, maybe similar to the Rugby League rules that might apply in the British Super League, perhaps. I mean, I suppose that would have made for some interesting and unusual game situations. But I suppose getting back to the point of the discussion, whilst these powers do seem quite extensive and the rules are a little bit unclear, like, what do you think about how the HM Treasury will control these third parties? Kind of what are the potential repercussions of not playing by the rules?
Right, that's quite a probing question, Rob. So the regulators have the authority to direct these third parties, right? CTPs, designated CTPs at this point, to do whatever is specified or not specified in the directive. So what if these third parties don't play by the rules, right? So it's repercussions that give the powers the teeth in any scenario. And in this scenario, the repercussions could be around, initially they'll launch an investigation. The Treasury would launch an investigation before taking any disciplinary action, as rightfully should be done. And then you can expect impacts which would impact the firms exactly, effectively where it hurts. So, right, in from a revenue perspective,
Mm.
they can direct these third parties to stop providing services, terminate existing services, set limitations and conditions, right? And these are the kind of impacts that would significantly deter third parties. And many of these companies, interestingly, would could be outside the UK's regulatory umbrella.
Mm, that's a really interesting point, actually, Abe. And I suppose something you mentioned earlier about makes me think about the sort of big global tech companies. And so I suppose what we're looking at here is that, whilst the Act doesn't fully bring them into the UK regulatory umbrella, it does get pretty close, just by the fact that they're serving into the financial services market. And I guess as well, because some of the potential critical third parties, this all, because they're providing services to the financial services market infrastructures, I guess not just in the UK, but into other jurisdictions. I guess this means that any sort of severe disruptions that that they may not be limited to the UK actually, and I guess these organisations are working with all those different regulatory frameworks in different regions, as well as this this new framework in for the UK as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, absolutely right. And if we think about it, some of these firms are so large and integrated into the global financial services network itself that a catastrophic disruption at a third party could impact the entire global network and doesn't necessarily have to be limited just to the UK as well, right? And one thing that some of the firms have called out as well is the fragmented regulatory expectations and supervisory practices across these different geographies, right? That can be detrimental to operational resilience, and it can also have an impact on increasing their compliance costs.
Okay, yeah, which does have an impact on those third parties, and I suppose the regulators are they're conscious that particularly for the this particular bill, that the measures that are contained in it, they are limited to the provision of services to UK firms. But I suppose another thing that strikes me actually about the bill is that and this is probably where it comes into the whole kind of third party and the kind of procurement world and how it impacts things, that whilst it aims at deregulation, this third party section, it really does feel like a bit of an exception to that. So it's essentially increasing the regulation, so a bit of a contradiction in just the overall aims of the bill, if we think about back to the history and the context and the background to why this bill was introduced in the first place. So the bill's aiming for deregulation, but it's also keeping an eye on financial stability, and the critical third party regulation part of that is designed to act as a safety net that prevents the I suppose the circus act going a bit crazy. So it is going to be a really fine balancing act, isn't it, Abe?
Yeah, yeah, it is. I mean, we're in uncharted waters, right, aren't we? And we'll have to wait and see how these powers are going to be used. And financial institutions, potential CTPs, everyone's looking closely for any signs of how this is going to start playing out.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, this whole discussion is so intriguing, and I would like us to carry on. But while we are talking about all the third party problems inside and outside UK, a lot of audience have given us some questions. So I think we should just take them up in between
Yeah,
and continue our conversation from there, right? I would start with the first question, that is, when are we going to start seeing the CTPs being designated? Is it soon? Is it going to be in the second half of the next year?
Abe, do you want to take
Uh,
that one?
yeah, Rob, sure, thank you. Uh, so, long answer short, we're not sure just yet. But the first signs will essentially be when we start seeing data requests from the regulator that are going to be focused on firms that could be potentially designated as CTPs across the industry. So there's the material suppliers that currently exist within the financial services space, suppliers where operational continuity or OCI or operational continuity and resolution. Now, where these kind of things are really important, that's where you start seeing the questions coming through, because what the regulators are going to do is they're going to collect the data, and that data is what's going to be fed to the treasury to then take the decision in terms of which firms need to be designated as CTPs. So yeah, I mean, it's that's going to be the first signs, the data requests that are coming from regulators.
So, and are these regulators going to be the ones who are working just in UK geography, or they will be based out of Europe as well and still have some affiliation with UK? How is it going to be?
So as of now, it's just going to be from the UK based regulators that they're going to be that are going to be asking questions to UK financial institutions.
Right. So, as long as your vendor is outside UK jurisdiction but have a work in UK, it's fine. Are they free of reins as per the new
So
charter?
the location of the supplier is, or the vendors are not going to be a factor that's going to be taken into consideration. The focus is just, yeah. So if you're a UK based financial institution, doesn't matter where the supplier is located, yeah, they can ask questions about any of the suppliers in your network.
Rob, you have any thoughts? Because we have more questions.
No, I think Abe's covered most of the kind of important points there. it's just going to be interesting to see how it kind of plays out in the next in the coming months, really.
Okay. Well, I have another question coming. What is really the difference from the way we assess and monitor critical third party currencies, currently? Sorry.
Abe, do you
Right.
want to
Should I take
maybe,
this one? Yeah.
yeah, do
Yeah.
you want to go? Yeah,
Right.
he's got
So
specialist knowledge in
That's
this
because Abe
space.
is
We
also
can,
concerned
yeah,
about technicalities. Yeah.
So in terms of it's not going to change massively as of now, because the way that we assess and monitor critical third parties at an individual organization level will remain the same. It's just it's going to roll up a little more, and there are going to be CTPs that are be designated within the industry as well. This may also make some conversations easier with material suppliers in the space, because now they have to align to very similar operational resilience standards that the financial institutions are already adhering to.
Hmm.
So yeah, again, long answer short, there's not going to be a lot of change for financial institutions themselves to
Okay.
change the way that they assess or monitor third parties.
Right. But again, this bill has given a prominent, power to Treasury. But Treasury was always in power in terms of this bill. So what has changed? Why has it changed
True.
from the prominent role that the Treasury has now in this bill?
Yep.
uh,
And
so just clarify. So what why is the Treasury sought to take a more prominent role?
Yeah.
Was that the question? Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's difficult to say. Difficult to say, really. Uh, perhaps perhaps it's about control and influence, and I guess from a Treasury, HM Treasury point of view, it's perhaps about having that control and being able to sort of manage I suppose that really critical and important industry to to the UK economy, not just the UK economy, but also kind of the global economy as well. If the aims of the UK is to become this kind of a leader in kind of the financial services sector. And that was one of the aims of this bill. There's a responsibility on the UK to be able to manage that market and the way that it operates in a very controlled, in a very structured way. And perhaps that's why the Treasury wants to that more kind of oversight, that closer link to that, because it's say there's not just a credibility issue, but there's it has huge ramifications if things aren't well managed, and as I mentioned earlier, the circus does go a bit crazy.
Hmm.
So perhaps that's the the rationale behind it. I guess there is some risks there about a political body having
Fair
more
enough.
input, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think the next question is about technical tech giants, but and I think we have just answered that in some bits and pieces before. But I'll still go for this question. So, what happens if one of the tech giants challenge the ruling about them being critical third party? That's a very interesting question.
right. I'll take that one if that's all right, because it links back to the earlier question about data as well.
Yes.
Um, so the decisions are going to be data backed, right? So it effectively, what is the net impact across the entire sector from that critical third party? So it's how many institutions in the sector do they impact, what's the scale of the impact, all of that is data backed. So there will be data that is available to the treasury to engage in those discussions.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, we do know the scale and size and influence of some of these firms, so it's going to be interesting to see how those discussions play out.
Right. So, in terms of the whole power dynamics changing and the treasury coming in place, which I frankly feel very weird because it was already there in the bill, but having more power now, and all the tech giants and every other giant in the banking sector and outside, what is happening next with the bill or the act? I mean, what should procurement teams be doing to prepare to ensure their third parties are prepared, their dynamics with the existing parties are not that much disrupted because of it? Any recommendations?
Well, look, I mean that is a great question, and
It's
it's
the
probably
question, Rob. It's
yeah,
the
it is
question.
the question, and I know we've kind of talked a lot today about the background and some of the implications and some of the kind of the rules and the powers and those sorts of things. And to be truthful, this is probably too big a subject to talk about in kind of 2 minutes. Now, this is something we are going to explore more. Actually, we're going to do a follow up podcast webcast later on, and where we will go into more depth on this. But when we think about some of the things that the procurement team should be thinking about, things around kind of contract management, supplier segmentation, continuing all the good stuff that they're already doing with these third parties as well. So things around kind of early renewals and the likes as well. So if you don't mind, Priyanka, rather than us kind of delving into that, perhaps that's something we can encourage people to come back and listen to in a couple of weeks' time on a
Yeah, no,
follow-up
and
session.
that's a nice segue to our session two, right? Because as I said initially, this is like a two-part series. So first, this part was more about introduction of this bill and maybe some pitfalls which Abe and you beautifully laid out for everybody.
Yeah.
And the second part would be more aligned to procurement and supply chain folks, which is where we will discuss some strategies and some of the parts which this question is intended to cover, right? And we are towards the end of our session any which way, which is why I would say if you didn't get the answer to your questions today, then do register and tune to our session that is coming on 12th of December, same time. But we don't leave any session unconcluded. No matter how much we don't want to conclude this, I have some conclusive points, a lot of takeaways. This bill is for the companies based in UK particularly, and not for the entire Europe. And two, that regulators have a greater authority to direct vendors to do whatever is specified in the directives given in this bill, and then they can talk to them very upfront so that they can save themselves from the legal proceedings. These are my takeaways. But any last thoughts, Rob and Abe, from you guys?
Abe, did you want to
No,
go?
no, just want to thank everyone for tuning in, and Rob, Priyanka, thanks for your time as well. It's been really good discussion.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go over what we've discussed already. I mean, I think if people want to read up a little bit on the subject, it's one of those areas actually that you feel is sort of fairly dry and doesn't have much of an impact on procurement, but actually it does. But there are various sources of information that you can go to get some information, some background information. So you can look at the original discussion paper that Abe referenced, the DP3/22. It's an exciting title of that. Actually, Abe wrote a great blog on the subject that's on the GEP website as well. So doing a bit of self-promotion or promotion of Abe on there. So some really great information on there as well. So yeah, in preparation perhaps for that session on the 12th, it'd be, if people want to read, I think that's something to look at as well.
Awesome. I mean, that was the nice conclusion. Self promotion on the blog, and that is definitely a nice blog. Let me tell you, I read it, and it was so easy to understand what this whole thing is about. And thank you, Abe, for writing that out for us. Well, we are going to meet everybody on 12th of December. Till then, stay safe and take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Right, thank you.